Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Welcome back to KRA's The Hub podcast. This is the host of The Hub, Jonathan Overall, and we are excited for today's episode. I'm joined by a special guest. His name is Robert Sainz. He is the president and the executive director of New Ways to Work, where he leads efforts to strengthen workforce and education systems for young people. Now, prior to joining New Ways to Work, Robert spent more than 30 years in public service with the city and county of Los Angeles, including serving as the assistant general manager of the Los Angeles Economic and Workforce Development Department. Throughout his career, he has been a national leader in youth workforce development, helping to launch innovative initiatives such as Youth Source, Hire LA, and LA Rise. Robert, welcome to the Hub.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Yeah, this is such a great topic, discussing youth. We're actually recording this in the month of June, which is Youth Employment Month. There are a lot of youth hiring programs that are taking place throughout this year for the summer. But let's talk about your career. You've spent over 30 years working in workforce development, youth services, economic development. What drew you to this work, and what perhaps would you say has been part of what's been your commitment to serving young people in your career?
Yeah, so I've been very, very fortunate to have a career that I could actually work and help young people and other folks that had high barriers into employment. And for many of us, work is really a part of who we are, right? You know, when people ask you, your name, and you usually start with your name, and you give what you do and who you work for. So it's always been a big part of our identity in terms of work. I come from a very working class family. My father, my grandfather, uncles, we all did janitorial work. We had a small family business. So to me, work and life and family were all interrelated. And, having the ability always to work and contribute, to the family was something that I had a really a source of pride. I also, when you're doing janitorial work, it's the bottom rung of the economic ladder there, but what my father and grandfather taught me was to have pride in your work. And that no matter if you're cleaning the floors, washing the windows, or scrubbing that toilet, to do it with pride, to do it your best, and to make sure that you accomplish and always do, the work to the best of your ability. So I always had that in me, and I carried that, as I had the opportunities to go to college and go to grad school and being able to come into the public sector. And my very first stop in my work life was working for LA County Probation Department. And in working with young adults through that stint that I worked with the probation, really changed my life because I would walk into a unit within the Hall of Administration or the Hall of Justice at the time that had 25 guys that were going to be going away for life. And across those bars were black and brown young men mostly that were not that much younger than myself at that time. And what was the difference between, my opportunity and the goals that I had in my life and what was going to be their opportunity? And, and they had goals that were not going to be realized because they were going away for large stints. So it drove me as a passion to be able to share the opportunity that I had with young men and women like that. So I started there and built a career of really helping young adults, find their way in life.
Tell us about what you're currently doing with New Ways to Work and share with us the mission of the organization and the role that you play in helping communities to really support and see better outcomes for young people.
Yeah, thank you. So I always describe myself now as a recovering bureaucrat, as after 31 years in public service, and I'll talk a little bit later about those adventures within the public service. But as I retired, I wanted to be able to take the knowledge that I was able to gain and the expertise and the insights of how to do these programs. So I think oftentimes we always agree that we need workforce development programs, we need certain investments in our community. But then how to make those happen is a whole different piece. And I know organizations that, that do this and do it well, and then there's other organizations that don't do it as well. So I wanted to be able to have an organization, a nonprofit, that could really help build knowledge in the field, could help organizations, both big and small, and communities be able to collaborate to actually build systems and to build programs. So we started very small, and New Ways has been around for quite a long time in career pathway work. So we shifted the focus really more about collaboration and system building. So we do a lot of technical assistance work with community-based organizations, workforce development boards, and local communities, school districts, community colleges, to help build partnerships, help build those pathways for young people, but with a very special focus on the out-of-school youth population, the populations that are oftentimes not included in these pathway programs. So we've been really successful in having multiple projects across different states that bring people together, and New Way serves as that facilitator and as that knowledge base. Our consultant team is made up of about 25 folks. Many of them have many decades in the work, and many of them retired out of various systems. But we have distinct knowledge that we love to share with the field.
Now, in your career, I shared some in the bio. You've done work with justice involved youth, homeless youth, and you just mentioned disconnected youth. And when you look at today, 2026, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that are facing young people as they try to navigate career, employment, and also education?
Yeah, it's the knowledge. I go back to that. I would say when I first started my career, we didn't have the extensive websites and extensive information that young people have today. So there's much greater access to knowledge, but there's also less of what is good, and what is good information and what is good knowledge. There's a lot that you'll see and folks and young people being influenced by the social media, being and given a lot of different information. I think you hear, and I'll give you one example of the trend is saying, well, you don't need college, that you get a skill job. Yeah, and there's some truth to that. Yes, college is not for everybody. But should we stop doing college prep programs? No. We want to be able to have the opportunity if a young person chooses to want to go to college, but they need to have the knowledge, especially if you're first generation, or don't come from families that have a college going culture within their family, about what are the options there. And when you're provided with that good knowledge of what is available to you, then the young person can make an informed choice. Yes, I want to go to college, or no, I don't. I would rather do this vocation, or I want to go to this particular career. But if they're not presented with that, it really is difficult when you talk to a young person now who say, I want to be an influencer. Because they see so and so made so much money and so and so has done this. But no one's telling them how they're going to be able to do that. What is a viable path to be able to do it. And there's been also changes in the young people themselves. One of the great things that has is that they're not only just access to information, they're much more entrepreneurial today than they have ever been in the last 30 years in my career. You see a lot more young people who want to go into um, entrepreneurial, start their own businesses. And so then again, how do you provide them with that good knowledge to be able to have a successful business. Oftentimes, when have a young person who's an Uber, and I'll strike up a conversation and ask them, why do you do this, and what's the benefit? And they talk of things about their control of their own time, their control of their own destiny, how much they want to work. Then we'll have a supervisor, all the things that make a good entrepreneur. I often ask them, well, how are they depreciating their car and their taxes? And then like look at me like, oh, what are you talking about? So how do we give them the tools so they could actually be successful? How could they take advantage of all the tax incentives and tax breaks as an entrepreneur and a small business person could get? And if they don't have that information, then how is it them to be success? It's harder for them to be successful.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about the impact of what is seen through social media, because that really shapes how people interact with services. I think for myself, lot of services, I don't go into a bank anymore. I do that online. I'm sure that probably influences one, how young people think about receiving services towards employment, education, but also, as you mentioned, when it comes to the career choices, entrepreneurship. Follow up to that question, how do you think we can respond or the system can respond to help support that entrepreneurial drive that can lead to opportunities for young people?
Yeah, and I would say, a lot of times our system is behind the curve on this. We need to get ahead of the curve. And I ask, workforce boards all the time, are you doing a youth entrepreneurship certificate?
Mhm.
So in the community colleges will have youth entrepreneurship certificates. Say, do you have one that's targeted for young adults and marketed to young adults, for young adults, and talk about their issues and concerns? Oftentimes they don't. They don't have that. So within Los Angeles, we've been working with the college system to help and develop a certificate. I know there's some really great programs out there that have done it across the country, but that is just one simple way that the workforce systems, can encourage and is developing programs that are targeted to the specific needs, but it's within a structure that gives them those certificates and that kind of legitimacy. Uh, there's also on the business, side of the house, workforce development, of course, has the business as a customer, right? And so seeing the small entrepreneur as a customer and being able to design programs specifically for them to help with taxes as one issue. That's what really does mess up young entrepreneurs of not paying the taxes and how to get the registrations and licenses and that sort of thing. But the second piece, which is really critical, is access to capital. So most of the young people are borrowing money from, their friends or family if they can, or credit cards. But how can they get access to startup capital if they have an idea and how to move forward? So when you see, these very successful young entrepreneurs, usually is that there's someone that is funding them out behind the scenes that they get access to cheap capital. So that's another piece that our systems could respond to and being able to um, address that particular need.
We talked about how the times social media is impacting the industry right now, especially when it comes to youth and how we can respond. I want to talk about another factor, and that is federal policy, legislative changes that are being proposed, things that are being cut, things that are being added. How is that, from your perspective, impacting organizations and systems in serving young people?
Well, I have to say, the current administration's policies to cut youth programs has been devastating across the country. The closing or the attempted to closing of the Job Corps and the AmeriCorps of some very national branded programs. The current budget to remove WIOA youth funding that's out there are all extremely devastating to our field. So one of the roles that we've played over the last couple of years has been both cheerleaders, on the sidelines, as well as active advocates, to fight against these type of cuts at the national level. This federal disinvestment on our young people are only going to have detrimental impacts for the future. If you talk to many of folks who are in their 30s and 40s now with established careers, you ask them where did they get their start, and especially when you talk in many big cities, they'll say they started with their public workforce system, their summer job that was subsidized, or programs such as Youth Build or a Job Corps or AmeriCorps. And so the current status right now is very scary, I believe, for many of the programs. But the positive side to it is that there has been a huge amount of pushback, both as we say on the left side of the aisle and the right side of the aisle in Congress. There has been, which is shows why these programs are so important for communities at large. So I know the restoration of the Job Corps, the restoration of the AmeriCorps budget, and I'm fully confident, the WIO youth dollars will be put back in the federal budget by both sides of the aisle, shows that there is support for this. As an advocate, I say there needs to be more support. So there needs to be an effort for summer employment in particular. There needs to be a big investment by the federal government for summer youth subsidized employment to be able to give individuals their first job and get them that work experience. There needs to be an opportunity youth investment that hasn't been uh, uh, made in the last 25 years. The youth opportunity grants that I started my career with was also tied to was $1 billion investment 25 years ago. And we haven't seen that type of federal investment, new federal investment in a very long time.
As an advocate, what are some ways that people in the system, perhaps listening in our audience, how can they be a part of that voice or that message in terms of advocacy for the work that's being done to amplify the side that is standing as resistance to some of these cuts? What would that look like?
Yeah, it is informing and being able to talk about the positives of these programs. And if you're a youth build program, if you're an AmeriCorps program, you're a WIOA program, you're connected with a WIOA board, to talk to the local legislators and to inform them of the good work that you're doing. Being a product of the system and knowing the system as I have over the last 30 years, there is some fantastic people and fantastic local leaders that are doing amazing work with people and giving them that first chance, that second chance, in some cases, that third chance to be able to have a sustainable life. But you have to tell people what you're doing. Oftentimes, and part of my upbringing was you put your head down and you did the work, right? You didn't pound your chest and say, look at me, how good, great the work." It just wasn't part of our culture. We did the work. And that's why the workforce development field it's much like that. We tend to just do
Mhm.
the work. But we need to tell people and coming on to or having podcasts like yourselves, or hitting additional audiences, being able to get into local newspapers, into locally elected offices. We spend a lot of time working with the U.S. Conference of Mayors because they have a huge national reach. Folks work with the county associations and the National League of Cities are all very important pieces. But to me, it's really about highlighting the work, taking pride of what we have done, and showing folks that this investment is not going to be squandered. It actually shows results.
When it comes to the work, I mentioned earlier the work that you've done around disconnected youth. Tell us about the National Engagement Reengagement Initiative and how this work is impacting youth right now.
Right. So the National Reengagement Network, which was the predecessor to the current initiative, was under the National League of Cities, and they had long supported it greatly. And again, because some of the cutbacks and the disinvestments, they weren't able to sustain it. So New Ways to Work has taken up the staff member Andy Moore, and so 100% credit to Andy Moore, who's just a tremendous leader in the field. And he's worked with over 60 communities around the country to build re-engagement centers. And these re-engagement centers is doing exactly what we were talking about. It's reaching into those populations that don't necessarily often participate in workforce programs or often participate in school programs. These are the young people that have been disengaged at school, also not getting their high school diploma. So there's a real incentive for these re-engagement centers to have consistent and learn activities of how to reach this particular population and how to get them back into school and get them back into work. In Los Angeles, where I'm most familiar with in the work, we worked in partnership with LAUSD, the City of Los Angeles, and dozens of community-based agencies, and we operated 14 centers that re-engaged young people. And we went out and looked for the folks that had not completed their 11th grade or left 12th grade without getting their diploma. And with the school district taking the lead, help identify these young people and then invite them back in and say, how can we help you? How can we get you over that line for at least a high school diploma? And the national studies show that there is a huge gain, income gain for your future earnings having a high school diploma versus not having a high school diploma. So statistically, we know that we get them over that line, they have a greater chance for job opportunities and mobility. And then there's a great jump. If they get a college degree or advanced training, it almost doubles their income over their lifetime. So, using that, the National Reengagement Initiative has brought these organizations together and have shared their experiences, have developed lessons learned. There's going to be a couple policy papers being put out in the next month or so that we're going to share with the field. Again, what is working well in Chicago, or what is working well in New York, or what's working, out in North Carolina? How do we share that with Los Angeles and vice versa? So that's really around that capacity, that knowledge sharing. And then the capacity building is training people about how to re-engage young people, and especially the young people who are not on that traditional track. When I first came to Los Angeles and started doing the work with the workforce system, I asked them, how were they re-engaging? Because they would say, well, we have the doors open, but the young people don't walk in.
Mm.
And first of all, they were running office hours from 9 to 5. Well, young people don't run on 9 to 5 schedules, right? And so, could we open the centers in the evening time and do, a 12 to 8 schedule? Could we do Saturdays? But the second piece of it, it was to go where the kids were at.
Mm.
And so anytime a center would tell me that they didn't know where the young people were at, I said, well, come on, get in my truck and so I'll take you to where they're at, and we'll go to the park. And so look at, there's 100 young people here, well, are you engaging them there? And so, with our youth opportunity grants, so where we did this, we walked every housing development in East Los Angeles and in South Los Angeles and Watts. We walked unit to unit and went in teams of 2 and 3 and knocked on the door at 10 in the morning. And staff said, well, why are we walking on 10 in the morning on Tuesday? Because if a young person opens the door at 10 in the morning on Tuesday, they need to be in school or work, right? And so you have to go out and engage and find them. And so that's a lot of the work that we're doing on the national level under Andy's leadership.
That's great. Going back to the practical solutions, what makes sense, and really thinking outside of the normal construct of waiting for students, waiting for participants to come into our doors. Robert, we talked a little bit about some of the challenges that face youth, but as you think, especially from the lens of an organization, that's the work that you do, helping organizations design programs, thinking towards the future when it comes to serving youth and the needs, and what approach do you believe is most important for an organization to take when they're thinking now, but also towards the future of serving youth at a higher impact?
To me, there's really three key things. One is your data. to understand your community and understand where folks are participating and not participating. So what we do largely when we come into an area, we ask the workforce area or the college or whoever we're working with, what is your data? What does your population look like? I would tell you 9 out of 10 times they'll say they don't know. When they really get honest about it. So we usually do an initial data assessment and look at where are your out of school youth populations and what do they look like and being able to get a demographic. So the same market researcher that if somebody was putting in a Trader Joe's would do, right? They want to know where's that higher income, but you want to use the same data to understand your population. We did a huge amount of work in Las Vegas and Southern Nevada, as an example. And they had they knew they had a large population, but they had no sense that it was as large as it was. And at that time, it was over 37,000 young people in Clark County, largely, that were out of school and out of work. And then we broke the data down by neighborhoods, and again, not to get that we're looking at this street versus that street, but we were able to cluster it into communities and to see the difference. And again, by people's gut, they knew that North Las Vegas had a different issue than West Las Vegas, or the Central Side, or Summerlin had a different population. But when we were able to actually, have that data, it became very, very powerful. And they were able to use that data to advocate for additional resources, use that data to advocate for greater collaboration. And through that, they were able to develop an Opportunity Youth Coalition, and it's running. It's just a great work that's done by Jaime Cruz and his team out there. And with the city of Las Vegas and and Clark County schools, a true collaboration. So data's one. The second piece is having the staff capacity. The biggest piece of this work is who is that young person talking to and their knowledge. But beyond their knowledge is their heart. Do they care? Most of our disconnected youth populations are disconnected for a reason. It's not just because they didn't want to get out of bed and didn't want to go to school or don't want to get a job. That's what you see on the surface. When you go underneath, there's usually significant issues, significant emotional issues, significant health issues, mental health issues, might be substance abuse. There's a lot of different issues that young people have to deal with. So you need to have staff that have a capacity and empathy to actually understand and reach that young person where they're at, and not make a judgment of where they're at, but assist them in helping build a bridge to where they want to go. And that is so important. I can't stress that enough, of having staff that really, as we say, cares, that caring adult. You have the greatest program in the world, but if you have staff that kids don't relate to or don't feel attached to, they're not going to come. You can have very minimal programming of basketball and a whistle, and kids would be clamoring if they felt that that coach and that referee were caring adults about them. And I'm simplifying that, but it really, to me, that staff capacity is the second. And so, what kind of training, how you're doing that is important. And the third is really about the collaboration and partnerships. There's no one agency that could do this alone. And if they could, they would have done it, right? Yeah. Yeah. You can't show me one organization that has, mastered this by themselves. The folks that have done, the best, and you think, from the Harlem Social Zone as an example to the budding work that's happening in Southern Nevada to work in Los Angeles, we've done over the years, has been done in partnerships and collaborations. And how do you keep those partners and collaborations going and being managed? And that's a specific skill that you have to have intent, that you're bringing people together with a purpose, and you're sharing resources. Most importantly, you're sharing credit. I can tell you how many times collaboration fell apart because an award ceremony didn't mention XYZ organization, or they forgot to do this or do that, and people get upset, and they're like, I'm not going to participate no more. And so you have to be very intentional about how you maintain and manage those partnerships over time, and then resource the partnership because it's not done for free. And it takes staff capacity, to be able to do that as well. So those are the three things that we really concentrate on in terms of looking and having effective partnerships to bring young people back into these workforce and education systems.
I like the approach. And like you said, young people, they can read through something that is not authentic and that is not geared towards them. And so that really forces us to think outside of the box on how we can present who we are, what we do, our programs in a very authentic and real way for the young people. And it takes listening. And you mentioned that earlier. And so a lot of great keys there. In closing, Robert, I want to give you the opportunity for those out there that are in this work. Outcomes and impact, that's what they're here for. And to see that. You talked about the stories and telling that story of the work that we're doing. But to those workforce leaders, the policymakers, you were in that world as well. If you were to give a challenge or a call to action today, what would that be?
We'll start with that part of listening to the young people themselves. One of the greatest lessons I've had over the last decade, and more so in the last 5 years since I left the public system, is to listen a lot more, but listen to the young people and what they're saying, because like you mentioned, they'll vote with their feet. If it's not good for them, they won't come. Even though they'll come and eat the pizza and then they'll leave. But being able to and not just listen, but to engage them. One of our partners, Laurie Carriere, and her team at the Alliance for Children's Rights have done a really great piece on youth engagement and having youth being part of the design and the planning. And I have to say, for me, being like I said, a recovering bureaucrat, it's like you didn't think about that, of having the young people themselves as a part of it. So I do challenge my colleagues and folks out in the field doing this work is to bring young people into that initial conversation and the design. So not just listening to them, but having them actively participate. And again, I'm still working on that myself. So it was a lesson to be learned. The second piece is to have some resolve. The challenges that we've had in this past couple of years, and quite frankly, it's going to be the same challenge in the next couple of years as we go, through this administration, is to have resolve. That you're going to do this work regardless if you get that grant or don't get that grant. It might look different, but you have to have that resolve for the community and the work that you do. And the third, piece of advice is to celebrate, your successes. And in our field, we don't do that well. Like I said, we're all workers. We like to work. So, we need to be able to stop and take a breath and celebrate, that young person who got the first job, or celebrate, that reentry guy who completed a training, or that young woman who's moving on into her educational, whatever it is, being able to celebrate and actually own a piece of that, of the work that we do. Our field, the workforce development, is often, not regarded as a field in and of itself, but we are, and workforce development folks are very, very special in terms of what they do, because they have to translate education, they have to translate other community local jargon, they have to translate workforce development and the state labor policies. So we're constantly bringing in information and making it useful for the people that sit in front of us.
Well, Robert, I want to thank you for those thoughts and joining us here today on the KRA's The Hub podcast. And we'll have to have you on again at some point in the future. And thank you for sharing the great work that you've done and are continuing to do.
Thank you, Jonathan. My honor to be here.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.